Disclaimer: this program contains graphic descriptions of real crimes. Viewer discretion is advised. All parties are presumed innocent until proven guilty in court. They boarded that ship as husband and wife, hand in hand, promising forever. The kind of forever you dream about on wedding nights, where nothing could ever touch the happiness in front of you. But when the cruise returned to port, only one of them walked off alive. The bride had her story. But the ocean had its own. Was it a tragic accident, a desperate choice, or something far darker? This is the haunting mystery of a honeymoon cruise that ended not in love, but in loss, and a disappearance that still echoes today. Leah and Marcus West had what looked like a picture-perfect love story. She was a travel nurse, always on the move but full of warmth. He was an ambitious entrepreneur who had built a small but promising drone photography business. Together they made sense, her compassion balancing his restless ambition, his adventurous spirit pulling her out of her routines. Their wedding in Savannah had been intimate but beautiful, a candlelit chapel, vows whispered like secrets, and a reception where friends remembered Marcus joking, "Forever starts tonight," and forever, it seemed, was waiting just beyond the harbor. Their honeymoon cruise was supposed to seal the promise. 7 days drifting across turquoise waters, nights of dancing under the stars, and a luxury balcony suite that felt like a floating dream. Leah had packed color, coded itineraries, snorkeling in Cozumel, Zip, lining in Roten, endless sunsets. Marcus had teased her, saying he just wanted to wing it. But they both agreed. This was the trip where they could leave behind stress, worries, and even the ghosts of old arguments that sometimes surfaced before the wedding. On the ship, they looked inseparable. The cruise photographer snapped shots of them laughing in the wind, clinking glasses at dinner, caught mid, kiss on the deck as the sun melted into the horizon. To strangers, they weren't just passengers. They were the couple everyone else wanted to be. But ships are full of secrets. Behind the laughter, there were late night conversations that trailed off into silence, glances that lasted a beat too long, and promises that, maybe, one of them already knew couldn't be kept. On the last night of the cruise, everything still looked perfect. They dressed up for dinner, Leah shimmering in a silver dress, Marcus in his navy blazer. They ordered sea bass, shared a molten chocolate cake, and toasted with champagne brought by the waiter to forever. Passengers nearby remembered Marcus raising his glass and saying, "To the last night, and to the first forever." But as the ship cut across calm seas toward Miami, forever began to crumble. By dawn, Marcus West was gone. No scream, no struggle, just silence, and a bride whose story never quite matched the tide. The ship cut across calm waters on that final night, gliding toward Miami with the skyline still hours away. No storm, no waves, no warning signs. To the outside world, it was just another night of music, champagne, and couples clinging to the last magic of vacation. For Leah and Marcus, it was supposed to be their last perfect memory. They dressed with intention. Leah's silver dress shimmered under the ship's soft dining lights. Marcus adjusted his navy blazer with the crooked cufflink Leah always teased him about. At dinner, they split sea bass and fed each other bites of warm chocolate cake. The waiter brought them champagne on the house, congratulating them again on their honeymoon. To the last night, Leah smiled. To the first forever, Marcus added, raising his glass. Other passengers remembered the toast. They remembered the laughter. To anyone watching, the couple radiated happiness, but the night still had hours left to tell its own story. After dinner, they strolled the outer deck. A cruise photographer snapped one last candid. Leah's hair caught in the wind, Marcus's hand reaching playfully toward the lens. Then the music pulled them into the nightclub, where neon lights bounced across their faces and the bass pulsed underfoot. Friends they'd met earlier joined them on the dance floor. At 11:18 p.m., Lee's phone buzzed with a notification from the ship's app. Free entry at the piano bar for honeymooners. By 11:42 p.m., they were there, singing loudly and off, key to piano man kissing between verses, their joy spilling into the room. At 12:07 a.m., the bartender served their final round. At 12:34 a.m., they left the bar, arms linked, laughter fading into the hallway. Security cameras showed them walking toward their suite. The door opened at 12:36 a.m. and closed behind them. It should have ended there. At 1:08 a.m., another camera caught Marcus alone on deck 12, standing at the rail, staring into the black expanse of water. At 1:13 a.m., he moved toward the midship staircase. At 1:20 a.m., he walked along the starboard side. At 1:24 a.m., he vanished behind a structural column that blocked the camera's view. At 1:26 a.m., a second camera farther down the deck should have picked him up again. But it didn't. Marcus West had disappeared into the blind spot and never came back into view. Lee would later tell investigators that Marcus woke restless around 12:50 a.m., complaining that the champagne sat heavy and that he needed some air. She said she drifted back to sleep, expecting him to return, but when she woke at 2:30 a.m., the sheets beside her were cold. At 5:55 a.m., as the ship glided toward Miami, Lee walked trembling to guest services with 6 words that would change everything. My husband never came back to the room by the time Lee's trembling voice reached guest services. The sun was already breaking over the Miami horizon. The ship was minutes from docking when security scrambled to respond. The protocol was clear: lock down the timeline, sweep the decks, and check every corner of the ship. But it was already too late for a full man overboard procedure. The vessel was in narrow waters, and turning back would have risked chaos, with hundreds of passengers disembarking. Instead, the Coast Guard was notified. Within the hour, helicopters fanned out across the Atlantic, slicing the air above the ship's wake. Search boats scoured the channel. Radios buzzed with coordinates, but the ocean gives nothing back easily. Who leads an investigation when a man vanishes at sea? The answer depends on where it happens. The ship flew a foreign flag, registered to an open registry country, but Marcus likely went missing in international waters less than 20 miles from Florida. That meant the FBI Maritime Unit took the lead, while the Coast Guard coordinated the immediate search. On board, the FBI agents boarded as passengers disembarked, their vacation smiles fading as rumors spread like wildfire. A groom disappeared, the honeymoon couple. No, she reported it at dawn. Passengers whispered in elevators, at customs, in shuttle buses back to the airport. Some clutched the candid photos taken of Lee and Marcus earlier that week, unable to reconcile the joy in those smiles with the tragedy now unfolding. Lee was ushered into a fluorescent, lit interview room at the port terminal. She repeated her story. Marcus felt uneasy, left the room around 1 a.m. to get air, and never returned. She claimed she fell back asleep, waking hours later to realize he was still gone. The agents pressed. "Did you fight that night?" "No," Lee said firmly. "Any problems in the marriage?" "We'd been married less than 2 weeks," she replied. "This was our honeymoon." But when asked about their finances, Lee hesitated. "We were fine," she said, though records would later reveal Marcus had recently taken out a $1, $2 million life insurance policy, naming Lee as the sole beneficiary. That detail changed everything. Marcus's sister, waiting outside, broke down when she learned about the insurance. "He told me he wanted to take care of her if something happened," she said, "but he didn't think something would happen." Investigators took note. A honeymoon disappearance was strange enough. Add in a massive life insurance payout and a wife whose story was steady but too precise, and the whispers grew darker. Was Marcus's disappearance a tragic accident, a deliberate choice, or something orchestrated? The answers, the FBI knew, were hidden somewhere in the hours between midnight and dawn, somewhere in the blind spots of a ship that never stops watching. The first step was obvious. Replay the cameras. Cruise ships are floating cities, and nearly every deck is monitored. Agents traced Marcus and Lee's final night step by step. Dinner, the nightclub, the piano bar. The walk back to their suite at 12:36 a.m. The card reader confirmed their door opened. Both entered. The door closed at 1:08 a.m. Another camera showed Marcus alone on deck 12, his blazer loose, hands braced on the rail, staring into the Black Sea. 5 minutes later, he turned, walking toward the midship stairwell at 1:20 a.m. He moved aft, heading along the starboard side. Then, at 1:24 a.m., Marcus slipped behind a structural column, an area investigators knew too well, the infamous blind spot. Cameras on either side should have picked him up within seconds, but at 1:26 a.m., when he should have emerged, there was nothing. It was as though Marcus had been swallowed whole. Investigators turned their attention to the couple's suite. The balcony was pristine, no broken rail, no overturned chair, yet faint smudges lined the partition wall separating their balcony from neighbors. Fingerprints, Marcus's, were found about waist high, as if he had leaned against it, peering around the edge. Even stranger were the streaks on the divider, damp, irregular, the kind of marks left by fabric brushing metal. It was possible, just possible, that someone had slipped between balconies, but why would Marcus climb across in the middle of the night? The neighbor, a man celebrating a bachelor party, claimed he had been passed out drunk and saw nothing. On his balcony, investigators found a beer bottle tipped sideways, an orange peel, and a single chair pulled askew. No sign of struggle, no sign of peace either, just silence. Then came the haunting discovery. A passenger, reviewing photos on his camera weeks later, turned over an image to the FBI. Grainy, blurry, bathed in midnight blue. It showed what looked like a man by the rail on deck 12 at 1:25 a.m. Outline matched Marcus's build. One foot rested on the ledge. His blazer was open, caught in the wind, but there was more. Next to him, barely visible, was a shadow, low, thin, like a hand reaching or fabric blowing. Investigators couldn't be sure. Was it nothing more than distortion, or evidence that Marcus wasn't alone in his final moments? The photo didn't answer the mystery. It only deepened it. By daylight, the picture was clear but unbearable. Marcus left his suite shortly after midnight. He walked the decks, restless, maybe searching for air, or for someone. At 1:24 a.m., he stepped into a blind spot. By 1:25 a.m., a grainy photo caught him near the rail, and then nothing. The ocean, investigators realized, is the perfect accomplice, and yet the question remained, did Marcus fall? Did he jump? Or was he pushed? For investigators, motive often starts with money, and here it didn't take long to find. 2 weeks before the wedding, Marcus had quietly increased his life insurance policy from a modest $250,000 to a staggering $2 million. Lee was listed as the sole beneficiary. A rider in the contract meant that if Marcus's death was ruled accidental, such as a fall, the payout would double. When questioned, Lee insisted it was Marcus's idea. He said, "We were starting a life together. We needed to be responsible," she explained. She admitted she signed the forms, but claimed she didn't think much about them. But investigators couldn't ignore the timing. Days before marriage, days before a honeymoon, and then a groom gone missing at sea. Was Lee simply the unlucky recipient of circumstance, or had she known what was coming? Agents then combed through Marcus's laptop and cloud storage. His drone photography files filled most of it, stunning aerial shots of coastlines, rooftops glowing gold in sunset, sweeping vistas of marshes and lakes. But buried in a private folder was project titled The Last Summer. It wasn't Lee. The clips featured another woman, Claire Jenkins, a college friend with whom Marcus had briefly been involved during a breakup. The footage wasn't explicit, but it was intimate, the way Marcus's camera lingered on her face, as if filming what he couldn't say out loud. The fling had ended. He had reconciled with Lee, but the video suggested that Marcus carried ghosts into his marriage, ghosts Lee may have known about or feared. Another file chilled investigators further, a note titled King Tide. Tell Lee be honest, then marry her. Clean, unchecked, call dad's lawyer. Prenup template, checked. A man planning honesty, a man making promises to himself he never kept. Then the final piece, Marcus's phone records at 12:59 a.m. Just minutes before he was last seen, Marcus sent a message to an unsaved number, Deck 12, starboard by the lifeboats, 1:20. I'll just say hello and go. The message was never delivered. The perpetus it was sent to had gone dark, but the implication was obvious. Marcus planned to meet someone that night. Had he gone to settle unfinished business, to reveal a secret, or was it a setup that sealed his fate? 3 weeks after Marcus vanished, a crew member finally came forward. His name was Oliver Tate, a cocktail server stationed near Deck 12 that night. Nervous about his probation for a petty theft charge, he had avoided speaking up. But when he finally did, his words froze investigators in place. He claimed he saw a couple near the lifeboat station around 1:20 a.m., a man in a blazer and a woman in a shimmering silver dress. Oliver said he heard fragments, the woman's voice sharp, "You don't get to leave," and the man's voice quieter, "I just need a minute." Moments later, Oliver turned to grab drinks. When he looked back, the woman was gone. The man was alone at the rail, leaning out, palms spread as if steadying himself on a spinning world. Then Oliver swore he heard something, a faint splash beneath the roar of the engines. But Lee's statement hadn't changed since the first day. Marcus left the room alone. She stayed inside, drifting back to sleep. She insisted she never left their suite after 12:36 a.m. The hallway cameras seemed to back her up. No silver dress appeared on their floor between 1:10 and 1:30 a.m. But investigators knew the ship's design had blind stairwells connecting upper decks, stairwells that could bypass cameras altogether, and a silver dress could be hidden beneath a borrowed hoodie in seconds. The problem wasn't proof of her guilt. The problem was the possibility. The photo from another passenger, that blurry shot of Marcus at the rail around 1:25 a.m., had always unsettled the case, but when investigators revisited it after Oliver's statement, they noticed what had been overlooked before, a faint blur beside Marcus, like fabric whipping in the wind. Enhancement couldn't confirm it. It might have been distortion. It might have been nothing at all. But to the FBI, the coincidence was chilling. Lee had worn a silver dress that night, the same detail Oliver Tate remembered, the same shimmer caught in the grainy photo. Lee's lawyers dismissed the account as unreliable. A probationary server, half asleep, claiming to hear voices over ship engines. That isn't evidence, but investigators didn't need a confession to sense something wrong. They had a pattern, $1 million insurance policy, a husband restless with secrets, a midnight meeting arranged by text, a cocktail server claiming he saw a woman in silver, a grainy photo with a shadow no one could explain. Piece by piece, suspicion was drifting closer to Lee. The haunting question was no longer just what happened to Marcus. It was, did Lee walk back into their honeymoon suite wearing silence instead of silver? 4 weeks after the disappearance, Lee filed the paperwork. To some, it was a practical step. closing accounts, protecting assets, preparing to move forward with life. But to others, the timing was telling. The dollar won. 2 million life insurance policy loomed over every interview, every headline. The accidental death rider, the payout could double. That meant Lee stood to collect more than $2 million from a man who had been gone less than a month. Her lawyer framed it differently. This isn't greed. This is survival. Without closure, she can't even access their joint accounts or finalize the home they were under contract for. Filing the claim is simply procedure, but in true crime, motive doesn't always hide behind shadows. Sometimes it sits in plain view, written in ink on a policy form. If Lee expected sympathy, she didn't find it in Marcus's family. His mother, seated in her living room, surrounded by photos of her son's childhood, didn't mince words. She was sweet as pie before the wedding, she said, but cold as stone after. She revealed a detail that hadn't surfaced yet. 2 days before the cruise, Marcus had called her. His voice had been anxious, unsettled. He asked her if she believed people could truly change. I told him yes, she said softly. That's what marriage is supposed to be about. But now? I don't know what he was really asking me. To her, Lee's quick claim on the money didn't look like survival. It looked like calculation. News of the case spread quickly. The story had all the elements that fuel public obsession: a young newlywed couple, a luxury honeymoon, and a groom who vanished into the ocean without a trace. True crime forums lit up. On one side, defenders argued Lee was a grieving wife caught in a nightmare. On the other, skeptics dissected every inconsistency, every pause in her interviews, every detail of her silver dress. Headlines branded her with monikers she couldn't shake: the honeymoon widow, the bride who came home alone. Lee stopped giving interviews. She avoided cameras, but silence only fed the suspicion. The less she spoke, the louder the questions grew. To prosecutors, the picture forming was hauntingly familiar. A sudden life, insurance increase, conflicting timelines, a witness claiming to hear her voice, a mother convinced her son had doubts, a public primed to believe the worst. It wasn't enough for a trial. Not yet, but the investigation had shifted. This wasn't just about a man lost at sea anymore. This was about a bride whose every move was beginning to look like motive. And though no courtroom date had been set, the story was already on trial in the only place that mattered, the court of public opinion. 6 months after Marcus vanished, the cruise ship was still running its route. Honeymooners came and went, their laughter echoing down the same corridors where Marcus had walked his last night. For the crew, life had moved on, but the ship still carried secrets. During a routine deep clean of Deck 12, a maintenance worker bent to scrub near a drainage grate along the starboard side, just steps from the lifeboat station where Marcus had last been seen. Something metallic glinted from the shadows. At first, the worker thought it was just a coin wedged between rust and salt, but when he pried it loose, his hands trembled. It was a wedding ring. The ring was scuffed, salt, stained, but still intact. Etched inside in neat script were the words, MW3LW 8/12. Marcus and Leah West, their wedding date. It was undeniable. The ring was his. Investigators studied the find. The location was chilling. It placed Marcus directly at the rail, his hand pressed against the very spot where he may have slipped, struggled, or been pushed. The scrape marks along the band suggested contact with metal, as if it had caught on the edge in one desperate second before falling free. It was a haunting echo of Oliver Tate's testimony, a man leaning forward, palms spread, and then a splash. Investigators presented the ring to Lee. Her face stayed unreadable. She insisted Marcus never took it off, not even in the shower. To her, the ring proved only one thing, that Marcus had been there. It did not prove she had followed, but prosecutors saw something else. The ring meant Marcus had reached for the rail, had clung to it. A man simply jumping wouldn't have left a band wedged in steel. That detail suggested resistance. That detail suggested a struggle. The discovery reignited the media frenzy. Headlines screamed, "The groom's ring found." Talk shows replayed the story, panelists debating what it meant. Some argued it sealed the case as a tragic accident. Marcus leaned too far, lost his balance, and slipped into the sea. Others claimed it was proof of foul play, a man holding on for dear life until his grip gave out, and always. The focus turned back to Lee, because no matter how haunting the ring was, it didn't tell the whole story. Only one person alive knew what truly happened in those missing minutes, and that person had walked off the ship at sunrise, leaving her husband behind in the tide. 6 months after Marcus vanished, a fishing charter dragging lines 15 miles off Florida's coast snagged something unusual. When the crew pulled it in, tangled among seaweed and debris was a blazer, heavy with salt and water. The color had faded to gray, but the cut matched what Marcus wore on his final night. Inside the pocket was a phone case, warped and scarred by the ocean. The screen was gone, the battery eaten alive by salt, but sealed within the plastic frame was a microbe, ship still intact. Investigators rushed it to the lab. Against all odds, fragments of data survived. Among the files were reminders and messages Marcus had saved. The king tied a list, the undelivered midnight text arranging a secret meeting, photos from the cruise. But one discovery chilled investigators most, an unsent note created at 12:51 a.m., just before Marcus was last seen on deck. It read, "I love you, and I am sorry." This was the wrong place to try to do the right thing. No signature, no explanation, just that cryptic sentence, frozen in digital amber. The note divided investigators. Some believed it was a farewell evidence Marcus may have chosen to end his life that night, racked by secrets and guilt. Others saw it as something else, a man planning to reveal the truth about his past to Lee, only to realize he had picked the wrong moment. Was the right thing, honesty, was the wrong place, their honeymoon, and darker still some argued it was a sign Marcus felt trapped. That maybe the wrong place wasn't just the cruise ship, maybe it was the marriage itself. The words were vague enough to bend in any direction, yet haunting enough to stick in every investigator's mind. When shown the note, Lee ran her fingers along the warped phone case, silent. She offered no interpretation, only saying softly, "He always wrote things down. That doesn't mean it meant anything." Marcus's mother read it differently. Tears filled her eyes as she whispered, "That's not my son giving up. That's my son trying to tell us something." He wanted out, but not like this. The phone should have answered questions. Instead, it raised more. The timeline was clearer now. Marcus had secrets he carried onto that deck. He sent a message to someone at 12:59 a.m., arranged a meeting for 1:20 a.m., and left behind a cryptic note about trying to do the right thing. By 1:24 a.m., he walked into the ship's blind spot. By 1:25 a.m., a photo caught him leaning near the rail. Minutes later, he was gone. The phone had spoken from the deep, but what it said only made the shadows darker. To understand how Marcus could have vanished so quickly, investigators ran a series of controlled simulations aboard a sister ship with the same design. 2 agents posed as Marcus and Lee, retracing every step captured on camera. At 12:36 a.m., they entered the suite. At 1:08 a.m., the groom agent stood on deck 12, hands on the rail. At 1:24 a.m., he walked into the blind spot. The team timed everything. It matched Marcus's movements almost perfectly. Then came the test no one wanted to watch, the balcony scenario. Investigators unlocked a cabin and tried slipping between balconies. It took just 14 seconds to swing a leg over the partition wall, brace a hand on the metal, and step into the next cabin's balcony. Another 18 seconds to reverse the move. On the 10th attempt, one agent's shoe slipped against the slick divider. He scraped his calf on the edge and cursed. He didn't fall, but he wasn't drunk on champagne either. The conclusion was chilling. If If Marcus had attempted this, whether for air, for space, or to meet someone, it would have taken only a small mistake to plunge into the sea. But there was another possibility. It would take even less time if someone gave him a push. Engineers ran impact models. If Marcus had fallen from deck 12, he would have struck the water at nearly 70 miles per hour when factoring in the ship's speed. The shock alone could have knocked him unconscious instantly. A fall like that would silence even the strongest swimmer. No splash loud enough to hear over engines, no chance to call out. Just a man swallowed in seconds. The simulation forced everyone into the same uneasy truth. Accident was plausible. One slip, one misstep, and Marcus's fate was sealed. Suicide remained possible, though his family refused to believe it. Murder could not be ruled out. The time, the blind spots, the handprints, the ring. Each piece could fit a narrative where Marcus wasn't alone on that deck. The haunting part wasn't what the reenactment showed. It was what it couldn't prove, because in the spaces between cameras, between testimony, between seconds, the truth could live and never be found. Marcus's final text, sent at 12:59 a.m. to an unsaved prepaid number, was short, almost casual. Deck 12 starboard by the lifeboats, 1:20. I'll just say hello and go. It was the kind of note that sounded harmless until you realized it was the last words he ever typed. The FBI dug deeper. Who was the intended recipient? The number traced to a burner SIM purchased in cash, then abandoned. It had connected to the ship's Wi-Fi for a short time before going dark forever. No identity, no subscriber name, just a digital ghost, but context mattered, and the timeline placed Marcus heading directly toward the lifeboats at the exact time arranged in the text. He wasn't wandering aimlessly. He was keeping an appointment. Attention soon shifted to a passenger just 2 doors down from Marcus and Lee, Grant Merriman, a 38-year-old businessman traveling with friends for a bachelor party. He had been seen with Marcus earlier in the cruise, chatting about drones during the aerial obstacle course, laughing over beers at the pool bar. On paper, Grant had nothing to hide, but when investigators pulled his phone data, something curious emerged. At 1:15 a.m., he posted a blurry photo to Instagram stories, neon lights, the shuffle of deck music. In the corner of the frame, barely visible, was the edge of a navy blazer, eerily similar to the one Marcus had been wearing. The timestamp lined up almost exactly with Marcus's last appearance. Agents brought Grant in. He admitted to drinking heavily that night, but denied any midnight plans. Marcus was a nice guy. He shrugged. "We talked about drones, football, that's it. I didn't see him after dinner." When confronted with the Instagram photo, he leaned back, blinking. "I didn't notice anyone. I was just snapping random shots. Look, if that's Marcus, I didn't even know." His story held. Mostly, but the polygraph didn't. Results came back inconclusive. His stress levels spiked when asked about whether he met Marcus on deck 12. The FBI couldn't prove Grant was the person Marcus texted that night. But the overlap was unsettling. A burner number on the ship's Wi-Fi, a groom arranging a hello and goodbye at the lifeboats, a neighbor with a blurry photo placing him near the same spot at the same time. Grant's denials weren't enough to erase suspicion, and yet, without hard evidence, he remained a ghost in the story, neither cleared nor charged. For investigators, it felt like a puzzle missing one vital piece. Marcus had secrets, unfinished honesty, an old fling, financial stakes that weighed heavy. Lee had motive, opportunity, and the shadow of the silver dress. And now, a neighbor had appeared in the margins, hovering in the blind spots where the cameras didn't reach. The FBI was left with a haunting choice. Was Marcus's final text the key to everything, or just one more breadcrumb leading nowhere? As the FBI dug deeper, their questions spread beyond the ship. They pulled financial records, tracked Lee's movements after the cruise, and combed through Marcus's digital footprint. Investigators interviewed friends, co-workers, even Marcus's old flame Claire. Every detail was examined under a microscope, but as the circle widened, Lee's world narrowed. Once chatty with reporters, she stopped giving statements altogether. She avoided cameras, ducked questions, and let her attorneys speak in her place. Lee is grieving, they insisted. She has nothing to hide. Yet the silence was deafening. The media had already branded her with a cruel nickname, the honeymoon widow. On talk shows, armchair detectives debated her every move. Was she a victim, or was she hiding behind grief? Every pause in her past interviews was replayed. Every glance downward, every hesitation, was spun as proof of guilt. Even when Lee stayed silent, the public filled the gaps for her, and not in her favor. The court of public opinion was convicting her long before any prosecutor could. Then came the moment that shifted everything. At a press conference, Marcus's mother stood trembling at the podium. Behind her were blown-up photos of Marcus, laughing as a child, grinning in his drone business hoodie, kissing Lee under a spray of wedding confetti. Her voice cracked as she spoke. "My son deserved a lifetime," she said. "Not 7 days of marriage and then silence. I don't know what happened on that ship. I don't know if it was an accident, a choice, or something done to him. But I know this. Marcus would not leave us without a word. He would not leave me without goodbye." Then she turned her gaze toward the cameras, her grief hardening into something closer to accusation. If anyone knows the truth, if she knows the truth, it's time to speak. The clip went viral. Sympathy surged toward the grieving mother. Lee's absence in the media spotlight only fueled the contrast. One woman broken but begging for answers, the other wrapped in silence, guarded by lawyers. Public opinion shifted overnight. To many, Lee wasn't the grieving widow anymore. She was the woman holding back the truth. And for the FBI, Marcus's mother had done what their evidence couldn't yet, tip the scales of suspicion. Months into the investigation, the FBI digital forensics team went back over every frame of surveillance video from the ship. Technology had advanced since the initial review, and new software allowed them to sharpen low-light images that once seemed useless. They focused again on the section around 124A, the blind spot near the lifeboat station where Marcus was last seen. That tiny gap in coverage had always been the most troubling piece of the puzzle. What the enhanced footage revealed sent a chill through the room. At 1:25 a.m., the familiar grainy image of Marcus leaning on the rail appeared, but as analysts enhanced the shadows along the edge of the frame, another shape began to materialize. A blurred figure, shorter, slimmer, seemed to move just behind him. The distortion was heavy, the details unclear, but the posture was unmistakable. Someone else was on that deck. Investigators replayed it again and again. The figure wasn't visible long, no more than 2 or 3 seconds, but it was enough to change everything. Marcus wasn't alone. The footage couldn't confirm clothing colors, but when slowed frame by frame, the light caught the second figure in a way that shimmered, like fabric reflecting under the deck lights. Some analysts argued it was nothing more than pixel noise. Others swore it looked like the glint of a dress, a silver dress, the very detail Oliver Tate, the cocktail server, had testified to, the very dress Lee had worn that night. Coincidence or confirmation? The discovery split the team. Skeptics said the blur was an illusion, a trick of poor angles and bad light. Without sharper resolution, it was reckless to assign meaning. Believers argued it was the missing puzzle piece. Marcus met someone that night. The evidence of a second figure right where he disappeared was too powerful to ignore. The file was logged as Figure B, but Figure B didn't just deepen the mystery, it weaponized suspicion, because now the FBI wasn't chasing an accident, they were chasing a shadow, and the shadow seemed to lead back to Lee. Publicly, The FBI stayed silent about the discovery, but behind closed doors, the case had shifted. Marcus's vanishing was no longer just about what he did on that deck. It was about who was with him when he went over. And if the blurred figure truly was Lee, the haunting question was no longer whether Marcus fell, jumped, or slipped. It was whether he was pushed by the woman he had married only days before. Behind closed doors, prosecutors began to stitch the pieces together into a narrative they could one day bring to court. The foundation was thin but damning. A life insurance policy ballooned to $1. $2 million. A witness swearing he saw a woman in silver arguing with Marcus, a blurry surveillance still that seemed to show a second figure on deck 12, a wedding ring lodged in the ship's grate hinting at a desperate struggle, and a wife whose silence grew heavier with every passing day. Individually, none of it proved murder, but strung together, it began to look like intent. By now, Lee spoke to no one, no cameras, no reporters, not even Marcus's family. Every word came through her attorneys, who issued sterile statements. She has cooperated fully. She mourns her husband. She will not be dragged into a trial by tabloids, but in a case built on perception as much as evidence, her silence was a weapon, one she couldn't control. To the public, it sounded less like grief and more like guilt. Yet inside the prosecutor's office, doubt festered. The evidence was circumstantial at best. The photo was too grainy, the witness too compromised, the midnight message too vague, and no body meant no forensic proof, no cause of death, no injuries to point to a struggle. Even the ring, once hailed as proof of foul play, could just as easily fit the story of accidental slip. Every time they tried to build a timeline that proved murder, the ocean stole their foundation. In the absence of a courtroom, the case lived in headlines and talk shows. True crime forums dissected every theory. Some saw her as a calculating killer, others as a scapegoat for tragedy, but prosecutors knew one thing. The longer the case lingered in limbo, the harder it would be to bring charges. Memories faded, witnesses moved on. The tide of attention would eventually recede. By the end of that year, the case balanced on a knife's edge. One more piece of hard evidence. Say, credible witness, a digital trace, a recovered body, could tip it into trial. Without it, everything might collapse into uncertainty forever. The question wasn't just whether Lee had killed her husband. It was whether the system could ever prove it. It came in on a rainy Tuesday afternoon. An anonymous message left on the FBI maritime tip line. The voice was distorted, the caller ID scrambled, but the words were clear enough to send agents scrambling. I was on deck 12 that night. I heard them. A man and a woman fighting near the lifeboats. He said, "Don't do this here." She said, "You think you can walk away from me." Then there was a sound, like a struggle. I didn't want to get involved. But it's been haunting me ever since. The caller hung up before leaving a name. At first glance, the claim aligned perfectly with what investigators already knew. Marcus had been seen heading to the lifeboat station. Oliver Tate had testified about a woman in silver. The blurry footage hinted at a second figure, and now another voice claimed to have heard an argument. But anonymous tips were dangerous. They could be truth, they could be malice, or they could be fabrications inspired by headlines. The FBI had to decide, was this the missing piece, or just another ghost story? Agents pulled the ship's passenger manifest, referencing anyone who might have been in cabins near deck 12 or had reason to be out late. They canvassed known witnesses, asking if anyone else recalled raised voices. A few passengers admitted hearing something around that time, but none could pinpoint where. Some insisted it was just drunken laughter carried by the wind. The anonymous tipster had been too specific, too neat, almost scripted. Lee's defense team pounced, calling the tip a desperate attempt to revive a dead case, and warning against what they labeled trial by rumor. Anyone could pick up a phone and claim to have heard something. Her attorney told reporters, if the FBI wants justice, they need evidence, not anonymous bedtime stories. And in a way, he was right. Without a name, without a witness willing to take the stand, the tip was legally worthless. But inside the FBI office, the tape of the call played over and over. The details were too close to existing evidence to dismiss outright. The phrasing matched the desperation of a real confrontation, and yet, without corroboration, it was smoke without fire. The tip had reopened wounds, rekindled suspicion, and reignited public outrage, but in the end it added no new proof. Marcus was still gone, Lee was still silent, and the ocean still kept its secrets. For investigators, the question lingered like salt in the air. Had they just missed their one true witness? Or had someone, somewhere, decided to invent a ghost? Months passed, no charges were filed, no body was found, and the case of Marcus West, filed under administratively closed, pending new evidence, has slipped into that gray zone where the law can't reach but suspicion never dies. Lee moved inland, away from the coast. She returned to travel nursing, blending into shifts, keeping her head down. On paper, she was moving forward, but her shadow followed her everywhere. Neighbors whispered, strangers recognized her face from headlines. Some muttered condolences, others muttered accusations. She was free, but she wasn't. Marcus's family could not let go. His mother kept a porch light on every night, telling reporters it was for when he comes home. His sister launched an online campaign called Justice for Marcus, posting timelines, interviews, and theories. The campaign caught traction. True crime forums dissected every piece of evidence, uploading clips of the silver blur, audio of the anonymous tip, and diagrams of Deck 12. To them, Marcus wasn't just a victim. He was a symbol of secrets at sea, of justice deferred, and Lee, whether guilty or innocent, was painted as the villain. Time has a way of transforming tragedy. The details blur, the evidence grows colder, but the story endures. Marcus's disappearance became more than an investigation. It became a cautionary tale whispered on cruise forums, a mystery retold in documentaries, a ghost story about love that sank before it reached the shore. Some believe he jumped, haunted by guilt and secrets. Others swear he slipped, one wrong step sealing his fate. But many believe the darkest version, that Lee, the woman in silver, followed him into the night and made sure forever ended in the water. No verdict was ever given. No courtroom closed the case, but in the public's imagination, the tide had already chosen its story. Today, Marcus's name lives in that uneasy space between fact and legend. His ring, his note, his midnight message, each a fragment, never a whole. His mother still insists he wouldn't leave without a word, and Lee walks through life beneath a shadow she can never outrun. For in true crime, sometimes the harshest sentence isn't prison. It's the silence of a story that will never let you go. Some stories fade. This one never did. Marcus West boarded a cruise ship a husband. He never returned to shore. What happened on Deck 12 in those missing minutes has been debated in living rooms, podcasts, and courtrooms of public opinion for years. But the truth, the one absolute truth, sank beneath the waves that night. Accident, suicide, murder, each theory fits, each leaves gaps, and the ocean, as always, keeps its silence. Over time, Marcus became more than a name on a manifest. He became a symbol of how fragile forever can be. His mother's grief, his sister's fight for justice, Lee's silence, all of it turned his story into a modern ghost tale. The details live on in fragments, a ring wedged in age. Grate, a note that said, this was the wrong place to try to do the right thing. A blurred figure shimmering near the rail. A splash no one could prove, but everyone swore they heard. Together, they form a riddle with no answer. Perhaps the most haunting part of the story isn't what we know. It's what we'll never know. Maybe Marcus slipped. Maybe he jumped. Maybe the woman he loved most stood with him in those final seconds. And the truth lies not in the tide, but in her silence. What we do know is this. Ships sail on. Passengers dance under neon lights. And couples still promise forever. The ocean glitters beneath them, but forever, as Marcus's story shows us, can vanish in the space between one heartbeat and the next. The groom never returned to shore. The bride did, and the tide, cold, endless, and unbroken, still refuses to give him back. A dream honeymoon, a missing groom, a mystery the ocean swallowed whole. Was it an accident, a choice, or something far darker? The truth may never surface, but the questions will haunt us forever. Thank you for watching this Murder Book 360 story. If you want more chilling tales of love, betrayal, and unsolved mysteries, don't forget to subscribe, like, and share. And remember, sometimes the most dangerous secrets are the ones whispered at night when no one is watching. Stay safe, and I'll see you in the next story.